My name is Chris Wharton, and I'm an associate professor in the nutrition program at Arizona State University. And I'm extrememely excited to have Jean-Martin Fortier here to offer this incredible workshop on profitable small-scale farming. This is a collaboration that's been months in the making with a lot of organizations, and I want to just call some of them out now. So Kelly Young, for example, at U of A Cooperative Extension, helped put this on, along with Steadfast Farms and Eric Schultz, and a number of other folks are contributing to this event. So I just want to make mention of one of the other organizations involved in this workshop. It's called the Food Systems Transformation Initiative. And so this is a new organization at ASU. It's one that I direct. And it's really focused on broadly equitable participation in the food system. And that means we really care about food security and people's ability to have access to healthy, oftentimes locally produced, culturally appropriate, affordable food. But it's also about ensuring that people can have livelihoods in the food system. And so this event is really an important piece of that. We really care about having an integrated and diverse food system and allowing people to have the opportunity to be producers and participate in the food system from that perspective as well.
Thanks for the intro, guys, and I'm really excited and stoked to be here. The weather is great, I must say. Quite a change in heart coming from where I am today. I'm really excited also that you guys were given the book prior to the workshop or at the workshop, because everything I'm going to talk about today is really written in there. And so you guys don't need to be taking notes. The important thing for me is to present to you guys the key element of our cropping system, trying to translate the things that make it work. These mechanisms, these principles, these concepts, so that you guys can take away from the workshop and from my book and from my work the key ingredients to the recipe. So we each might have different ways of cooking and different recipes, but there's key ingredients that I think make a huge difference in the success or the failure of a small organic farm. So that's my intention for me today. I hope to be able to convey that to you guys. And I'm hoping also to be just a little bit entertaining, because a full day workshop, if the speaker's not fun, is kind of boring. So that's my goal. Who among yourselves are presently, growing commercially? Okay, so not a lot of people. Who among yourselves are thinking about doing this seriously in the next year or two? Okay, so you guys are most likely aspiring farmers. It's a great time to have this workshop, because a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about has to do with farm setup and a different cropping system that we're usually used to. Who among yourselves have read The Market Gardener? Okay, not everyone. Okay, so we're set. So the way I'm going to do the workshop today is I'm going to tell a bit of my story, how our farm came to be, and then we're going to talk about the fundamentals of bio-intensive cropping systems. We're going to talk about the tools. We're going to talk about the management strategies for insects, for winter production, which is going to be quite fast forward over here, because you guys have you kind of have the reverse. You guys stop in the summer and then you grow in the winter. It's the reverse where I am. And talk also about crop planning, which is a key ingredient into the success of a small farm. And then at the end of the day, if we have time, I'll happily share some of our techniques for growing mesclun, for the CSA, how we go about that, farmers market, and Q&A, which is the best part of the day. So one thing to keep in mind as I go along with my presentation, I like to have questions, but if you could ask questions regarding what I just talked about, not about what I'm going to talk about in the next slide, which is usually what happens when a question is raised. So try to keep the questions, okay, JM, you just talked about this, I don't really understand. And then I'll be happy to answer. Does that work with you guys? So that's the mojo for today. Any other news that we need to say? No, we're good to go? So, okay, let's do it. So the bottom line of my story is that you can make a very decent livelihood farming on a very small acreage, either in the city, in the suburbs, or in the countryside, doesn't matter. And you can do so by using a different approach to growing crops. Okay, so that's the bottom line. And we haven't reached this, over a year. It took us many years to figure this out, but just like Eric said, if you guys can start from where we kind of ended, that might really kickstart people into becoming successful growers a lot faster than when we were starting out in 2000. This is our farm in numbers. I think it's important to put that in that context because it is going to give you an idea of about what we're doing. So we have a CSA of 140 member. We grow for 21 weeks. Our first delivery is beginning of June, and our last one, we end in November. Really cold. As of November, December, January, temperatures are way below frost. I don't know my Fahrenheit, how crazy that is. I work in Celsius in my brain. So just believe me when I tell you that it's pretty cold. We farm 1.5 acres, and the sales of the vegetable in 2015 were $150,000 of vegetable produced on site. So that doesn't equate for some of the vegetables that we buy from other growers that we know. We have 4 people working full-time on the farm from March to November. And we have 2 months off, my wife and I, which is the reason why we got into farming in the first place, because we wanted to have vacation in the winter. We use no tractor. We use not a lot of fossil fuel. Some of it goes to the delivery truck because we go to Montreal, which is an hour away from the farm, twice a week. The truck runs on straight vegetable oil, so that would be more if it didn't. Propane, because we heat the greenhouse, the nursery, especially as of January. $260 is for doing all the soil work on the farm. That's what goes into our BCS walk-behind tractors. And when we're doing our accounting, which is right about now, just my parking tickets when I go to Montreal is about 5 times more than the fossil fuel I use to power my system. The 45% profit margin is really the key element of this whole economic system, meaning that at the end of the year, when we've paid all our employees, our expenditures for seeds, for compost, the mortgage, almost half of it comes back to my wife and I as our salary. So, it's not super high. Lawyers make a lot more than we do. But, the world doesn't need more lawyers. So we're happy with that. So if you're familiar with farming and you've either worked on a farm or owned the farm, these numbers are pretty interesting. Usually an organic farm selling a diversified operation is going to be growing from 5 to 20 acres, and their profit margin might be around 15 to 20%. These are the better farms. And the bottom line for the growers is not going to be as good usually. So then the question is, well, how the hell do we do this? Okay, and that's the workshop of today. So, yes? It's Canadian dollars, but it's the same. Okay, so the buying power here in Canada is kind of the same. One of the difference is that you guys have much better prices than we do. So if I was farming in Phoenix, my prices would be, my margins would be perhaps better. But that's irrelevant because this is appropriate for where we are. But the farming techniques and the scale that we do, these can be translated here without any problem at all. Any other questions? Yes. Okay, so that's a great question. Yes, we attend farmers market. That's how we compete against bigger mechanized growers. We have the quality and our faces. It's hard for them to compete with that. I haven't also equated for the interns that are at the farm. So we usually have from 2 to 3 interns at the same time on the farm helping out. And people would argue, well, they should be there because you're actually not 4, you're 6 or 7. I don't count the interns because how can I say this? If they weren't there, it would be faster on many occasions, okay? Not because they're not good, it's simply because we have an internship program because we want to inoculate people into what a small, successful farming operation looks like. So they come for 3 or 4 weeks, which is not enough time for them to really catch on to the routine and to the technique and to really be efficient. And so the time that I'm spending with them is actually a 1 for 3. So I don't count. And also the other reason, which is important to consider, is that if I'm counting on them to do all the work, and then, because they're not paid, okay? And then they don't come, then I'm kind of screwed. And it happens all the time. I have a lot of people from France coming at my farm because my book was published in French first. And then, you know, Jean-Luc is going to call the night before and say, oh, JM, you know, I've met this beautiful French-Canadian girl, and I'm going biking across Canada. I will not be there tomorrow. That happens 5 times out of 10. Okay? So I don't know what's up with biking across Canada with nice girls. But so if they're not there and I'm counting on them, that means that I have more work, which is not what I want. So this is a 4-man crew operation. And me and my wife, we count for perhaps 1.5 workers because we really know what we're doing and we're fast. So, yes? From 2 to 3. We cook for them every meal. We try to have an experience for them where they're not just picking beans, they're learning, and we're taking some time with them. So we've been doing this for 10 years, this internship program. The employees also, they're paid $12 an hour. Minimum wage in Canada is $10.75, so it's a bit different. And the whole goal of having them on the farm is not for them to stick around. This is not a great job, meaning, you know, they can't have a house and kids and support their family with this kind of income. But the way we've set things up is that we want them to stick for 2 years, and then we want them to start their own farm the next year. So we hire people that are already kind of like trained, or they're serious about the commitment to farming. Then they stick for 2 years. They get a lot of good hands-on experience. And so far, we've had 7 people start their farm successfully using the techniques that we've developed. So that's part of our program. Okay? Oh, another one? Okay, so the way we set this up is that we work from 8 to 5, from Monday to Friday. And on Saturday, we go to farmer's market, which ends at 1 o'clock. But it's for 21 weeks, or 20 weeks. It's a bit early to discuss this, but why not? Over the years doing this, we've found out that working 8 to 5 was more productive than working 5:30 in the morning to 9:30 at night. We've put a time constraint on our workload, and it really forced us to prioritize certain things and to cut loose with other things that weren't so productive. So later on today, I'll talk more about that because that's a key element of what we do. We also try to work an 8 to 5 on the farm. Mind you, our farm's been established a long time ago, so these are not the starting years. So speaking of the starting years, this is a picture of the first farmer's market that we attended when we started the farm on rented land back in 2002. Both my wife and I graduated from the McGill School of Environment and Ecology and Environment in Montreal. We had spent 3 years looking at all the environmental disasters in the world, linking them to capitalism, but also to socialism, and look at all the physical and social and political aspects that creates these disasters. And basically at the end of our program, we were so discouraged with the state of affairs that we were like, oh, we need to do something that is relevant and physical. So I knew nothing about farming, didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in the suburbs, skateboarding, snowboarding. Just farming wasn't even cool back then. So my wife either. So what ended up happening is that we picked coffee on coffee farms, fair trade coffee farms. Then we went to New Mexico, and that's where we got in touch with a farming community around Santa Fe. We met a great grower there. His name is Richard. He's a French Canadian that had been farming there for a long time. And we learned with him, the basics of farming. And to make a long story short, we spent 2 years there, became farm manager on another farm. And for us, that was our first model of what farming was. So it was a small farm. It was in Abiquiu. So that's where Georgia O'Keeffe does all her painting, did all her painting. So beautiful landscape. And Richard was outside. He was growing crops. He was passionate about it. He would bring it to farmers market in Santa Fe, and people would line up to buy his produce. They would call him the salad king. He was more revered than the doctors or anybody else in that community. He was their grower. And I was doing the cash box, and I was looking at all the money he was making. I was like, man, you were making $3,000 in one Saturday morning? And then he would hang out in Mexico for a month or two in the winter. And so I was like, wow, this is a pretty good setup. This is a pretty good lifestyle. And that's how I got interested in farming. I didn't know that farming was supposed to be a drudgery. I didn't know you weren't supposed to make money. I didn't know it was supposed to be heavy mechanized, having 1, 2, 3 tractor, or working crew of 5 to 10 people. What I had seen was a positive role model that was small, that was successful, and that was positive for the community. And so that kind of vibe really stuck into me. And that's what we've been trying to mimic ever since. Okay? We came back to Quebec. Very different scene. Not happening like Santa Fe. Santa Fe is a really happening place. Probably around here it's pretty much happening too. So we would, we started our own farmers market, and nobody was there because nobody was interested in buying local organic produce back then. But we had seen it elsewhere, and we had captured the energy of it. And we knew that wave would come eventually. And that wave is not going to be stopped. And it's not stopping, and it's not going to be stopped even today. So we were, we knew in our mind that it could happen. We started on rented land because that's the model we had seen. We had seen a young couple living in a teepee around Santa Fe with their 2 kids, farming with hand tools. And we thought, yeah, that's pretty romantic. Let's just set it up that way. So we set up a teepee in Quebec. Very different. Very different. But it didn't cost us anything to get started. Made a lot of mistakes, which is a very important thing. When you're starting in farming, it's a great thing to do all the mistakes because that's how you learn from them. So this was a Norton slope, heavy clay, super bad exposure, but it had a great view of Pinnacle Mountain. Okay? And back then, because we were younger and still kind of like trying to figure things out, we were always thinking that was what we wanted. You wanted to have a view because you're working and you want to stop and contemplate and feel the blissness of all of this spectacular view, not realizing that actually you should be working, focusing, and at 5 o'clock, take your car, go to the point of view and have a beer there, and then you relax. So chose the site for the wrong reasons. Everything was super far apart from one another, but that's how we started. We were doing 30 CSA for 15 weeks. Then we went to 50 the next year. Everything was on, non-permanent setups, fridges that we took from the dump, laundry baskets, laundry machine to wash the greens. It was just very kind of like whatever. Whatever we had, we made do. So this is a picture, even it's so funny, this picture, like the basket could have been full. Just like represent. She has like 3 squashes in her hand. So we were just kind of like younger back then, and we were just kind of figuring this out. And we were excited, we were passionate about living off the land, about trying to find a sustainable way to live, very influenced by the Narings, back to the land. And we eventually grew out of that kind of thinking, but that was our start. Obviously the teepee in the summer, in the winter, wasn't hot enough for us to stay there, so we would travel. And one of that trip was really influential for us because we went to Cuba and visited farmers that were working in permanent raised beds. They're called organoponicos, and you would see acres and acres and acres of these permanent raised beds. And the reason why this was there is that when the Soviet Union fell apart, Cuba didn't have any fossil fuel on the island for almost a decade. So they had to cut down with the tractor work. They didn't have tractor parts for these old Russian tractors or any fuel to put into them, but also all of the herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers, these are all petroleum-based products. So they had to reinvent their farming to be 100% organic. And for vegetable production, that's what they came up with, organoponico systems. And this was how the commercial production was done throughout the island. Permanent raised beds. Okay? First time I was visiting a cropping system without a tractor that was on a larger scale than what we were doing in our 0.5 acre market garden. Yes? Yes.
What is the
Cement. Yeah. And the reason why this was cement is there was 2 reasons. First of all, they needed to employ people to work, and they had a lot of cement. So they just made things that way. That was the main reason. The other reason is because, like here, I should be careful if I say like here. These guys they're in a tropical climate, so they need to have moisture retained a lot. So the closed beds retain the moisture for the crops. So that was part of their reason. Everyone was farming with hand tools, intensive spacings, a lot of production per square foot. Okay? I don't remember, but they look to be 30 feet, 30 inch or 26. Okay? The next year, we went to France. And we went to France for different reasons. One of them was that at that point, I was really interested in this whole idea of bio-intensive growing, reading a lot of books from California, John Jevons, high yield gardening, all of them. They would always refer to the French intensive techniques. Okay. I'm French in a way. So I wanted to go and visit by myself what the small growers were doing there. And every time I would talk to people about bio-intensive, they would say, bio what? They didn't really get it. And then I would talk about, intensive spacings, a lot of production. And then they would bring me to these kind of places where production was really intensified, but under glass houses, monocultures, non-organic systems. And so I didn't really capture what I was looking for when I went there. But these are the farms that you'll see. A lot of the farms are in greenhouses. They're growing year-round. A lot of production, but nothing diversified. I was lucky, though, because farmers in France, they farm on small acreage, and they don't have... I would say if you were farming here, it would be kind of the same. You don't have 10 acres that's readily available. So you need to be working your soil in a different way, having lots of cropping, and these guys were really aware of the fragility of their soils. And for them, talking about rotor tilling was like, you guys rotor till? Ooh. And then they showed us different equipment, different tools that we've carried back when we came to Quebec. Yes?
What did you mean by lack of diversity?
Well, it was like salads for 2 acres.
Gotcha.
So if you only do salads and you have insect problems, you're kind of screwed. You need to put a lot of pesticides. So on our farm, it's a mixed, diversified. So we grow 40 to 50 different crops on that acre and a half. Okay? So eventually, in our farming story, after 2 years on rented land, we felt the need to get established in the community. We wanted to buy our own place. Land was super expensive, mind you, not expensive like here. Eric was telling me the prices of a 5-acre lot. But still, it was a challenge to find something that wasn't too expensive and wasn't too big or too small. And we ended up looking at this, which was a 10-acre property. It had a 7-acre woodlot with a 3-acre prairie, in the middle of which there was a rabbit coop. So a 40 by 100 building, which used to be the home of 10,000 rabbits. And we thought, wow, water is probably not going to leak inside the house. That would be a major upgrade from the teepee. And the price was, it was okay. So we bought that piece of land, and that was the start of our project in 2004. And the reality of our farming ever since is that we have a serious land constraint. We had about 2 acres to manage in order to get 2 yearly income derived from our farming. That was our initial objective, and the land constraint was there from the start. So we had worked in earthships down in New Mexico, really influenced by that. So we started to fool around with cans and south-facing walls. It was a pretty good building, actually. It was high and wide, and it was structurally sound. So we ended up just basically building a house inside a building, which we did on two winters. So I'm showing this to say that there's a lot of, perhaps, I'm not sure about here, but where I live, conventional agriculture is going bankrupt. So there's a lot of big barns. There's a lot of, complex that are being, nobody's growing them anymore. So it creates a lot of opportunities for us to recycle these into productive outcomes.